Hello and good morning, everyone. My name's Don Arleth, and you're watching World News. Tens of thousands of people took to the streets in Bulgaria's capital, Sofia, and other major cities across the country on Monday night in anti-government protests, triggered by the draft budget for 2026. The demonstrators are saying that the new budget is an attempt to mask widespread government corruption. The rally was the biggest in years in Bulgaria, with protesters packing the huge square in front of the parliament and carrying posters urging the change of government. Some demonstrators clashed with the police, who cordoned off the offices of the ruling parties in Sofia and pelted officers with rocks, bottles, and firecrackers. Young people made up most of the crowds, chanting that Generation Z does not agree with the budget plan. This is the first draft budget in euros before the country adopts the currency on January 1st. Protesters say that this is an attempt to mask widespread government corruption. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner will meet Vladimir Putin on Tuesday for talks on a possible way to end Russia's war in Ukraine. The White House spokesperson has said that the Trump administration, quote, feels very optimistic ahead of the Tuesday's talks in Moscow. U.S. efforts to broker a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine have recently intensified. In November, a U.S. draft of an initial 28-point peace proposal was leaked, and negotiations over the plan with Ukraine and European allies soon followed. Ukraine has also ramped up its diplomatic efforts, calling for a fair and lasting solution to end the war with Russia. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is visiting Ireland today. His trip comes ahead of Ukraine's intense diplomatic efforts and at a critical time for peace negotiations. The Ukrainian president and the First Lady arrived in Dublin in the late hours of Monday. On Tuesday, Zelensky is scheduled to meet with both the Irish Prime Minister and the Republic's newly elected president. Zelensky is also going to address the Irish Parliament and inaugurate the Ireland-Ukraine Economic Forum. Ireland is home to some 80,000 Ukrainian war refugees. Russian Nobel Peace Prize laureate Dmitry Muratov is urging global leaders to include political prisoners in any future peace deal over the war in Ukraine. In an open letter signed by 16 Nobel laureates, Muratov appealed to the Presidents Putin, Zelensky, and Trump, and the European Union to prioritize human lives in negotiations.
Since both Trump and Zelensky are now speaking in favor of a peaceful resolution of the issue, it means they should support the people who, even earlier than Trump and Zelensky, were talking about the need for peace. Will Vladimir Putin agree to release political prisoners? I don't know. Will Volodymyr Zelensky agree to this? I have no information about that. What I do know is, when we have the opportunity to negotiate, we must constantly talk about people's fates. Look, they are talking about money, about deals, about rare earth metals, about borders. But have you heard anyone talk about people? All these people consider it necessary to draw attention to the fate of human beings, not only to the border, to peace, to weapons, to security, but to specific individuals. As long as we do not place the human being at the center of politics, wars will continue.
Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation says that Russia's pompous statements about the capture of 2 Ukrainian cities are just part of the Kremlin's propaganda offensive ahead of peace talks with the United States. Moscow says Russian forces captured the frontline Ukrainian cities of POKROVSK and VOVCHANSK and are advancing elsewhere. The head of the Ukraine's State Center for Countering Disinformation, which is part of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, says that, quote, The Russians will make many attempts to exert pressure on the front line and accompany this with loud statements, end quote. POKROVSK is a city in eastern Ukraine with a pre-war population of 60,000. Moscow has attempted to seize it for the past 2 years and suffered vast losses in the process. VOVCHANSK is located in the northeastern Kharkiv region and, before the Russian full-scale invasion, had a population of some 17,000. The EU is working on a new sanctions package against Belarus in response to repeated violations of Lithuanian airspace by Belarusian weather balloons carrying contraband, and this is according to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Von der Leyen, who described the airspace violations as an unacceptable hybrid attack, met with Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda on Monday to discuss the issue and reassure Lithuania that the EU will be taking action. The EU's diplomatic service summoned the Belarusian representative in Brussels earlier today, calling on the country to stop hybrid attacks on EU members. On Sunday, Vilnius Airport was forced to halt flights due to suspected balloons in Lithuanian airspace. A drone was also discovered near the border with Belarus, equipped with a camera and capable of gathering intelligence. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas says a reparations loan for Ukraine backed by Russia's frozen assets would give Europe stronger leverage in any future talks with Moscow. Speaking after the EU Defense Ministers' Summit in Brussels, Kallas warned that without this financial backing, Ukraine could face greater pressure at the negotiating table. Her remarks follow a letter from Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever, to EU leaders opposing the plan and arguing that it could harm prospects for a peace deal. Belgium is home to Euroclear and its roughly 200 billion euros in frozen Russian assets. Remains one of the strongest critics of the proposal, citing risks to financial stability. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz are calling for a Copernican revolution in bilateral ties, vowing to deepen cooperation. Meeting in Berlin on Monday, the two leaders pledged to accelerate progress on defense, energy, and historical diplomacy, including long-standing restitution efforts.
We are witnessing a Copernican revolution in European politics because that is how we should describe the full Polish-German cooperation when it comes to defending Europe's eastern border, which is Poland's eastern border. As for symbolic support from Germany for those direct victims of World War II who are still alive, I will of course discuss this further today. And I will point out the obvious sad fact. According to estimates by the Polish-German Reconciliation Foundation, there are currently around 50,000 of them. If we do not receive a quick and clear declaration, I will consider a decision next year that Poland will meet this need from its own resources. I do not want to say any more about this. I know that you still have a debate in the Bundestag ahead of you, but I think you are close to a final decision, and I would also like to thank you for your personal commitment. In an extremely prestigious location, there is a chance, and I think we are indeed close to the final decision, that a monument commemorating the Polish victims of World War II, the Polish victims of Nazi Germany, will be erected. Our joint energy policy today is a sign of this radical positive change. We have a declaration on the table today that accompanies intergovernmental consultations, and in this declaration, Germany and Poland speak with one voice about the need to make Poland, Germany, and Europe independent of energy supplies from Russia.
We do not make any decisions concerning Russia without very detailed consultations with Poland. We Germans need a strong Poland as an equal partner. We have a fundamental interest in this, and we want Poland to be a powerful partner for a secure, free, and prosperous Europe.
Sitting down with TVP World, Roland Freudenstein from the Brussels Freedom Hub says that he believes that Germany will not pay World War II reparations to Poland. Instead, Freudenstein argued that Berlin will try to compensate Poland in other ways.
On the German side, of course, there are enormous fears that if you start officially negotiating reparations in the legal sense, then all the other nations that were victims of German occupation and military aggression in World War II will also get in line. And therefore, I don't think that there will be a classical reparation payment in the traditional sense by Germany, but there will be more than gestures, more than just handing back artifacts or erecting monuments. There will be payments to individuals. And this is going to be planned and negotiated in the months to come.
And Piotr Buras from the European Council on Foreign Relations says Germany hopes that Monday's Polish-German intergovernmental consultations can lead to a positive breakthrough in relations between Warsaw and Berlin.
Germany, I think, of course, hopes that it could lead to a breakthrough in the Polish-German cooperation, that this impasse or this stalemate we are in could be overcome, because I think it is really very problematic for both Berlin and Warsaw that this cooperation is not as advanced as it should be in this very difficult geopolitical context. And I think it's a very good positive sign that both countries intend to sign or prepare first a security treaty, which possibly could be signed next year.
The numbers are in and the economy is strong. Poland's statistics office has released final GDP figures for the third quarter. The results came in above earlier estimates, surprising analysts.
According to updated figures from the National Statistics Office, Poland's GDP growth is showing continued upward momentum. In the third quarter of 2025, it grew by 3.8% compared to last year, and this result came in slightly higher than the earlier flash estimate of 3.7%. The report shows stronger than expected investment, up more than 7%, a result bolstered greatly by continued disbursement of EU funds. But private consumption, however, grew by only 3.5%, falling short of economists' forecasts. Analysts at Bank PKO say the structure of the growth was not what forecasters anticipated, with more investment and less consumption powering the economy in the third quarter. They note, therefore, that the broader outlook will remain unchanged, with Poland still expected to finish the year with around 3.6% GDP growth.
And now to new travel options to and from Warsaw. Hungary's budget airline Wizz Air has returned to Warsaw's Modlin Airport after a nearly 13-year hiatus. Wizz Air marked its comeback with flights to Athens, Barcelona, and Bergen. In total, the carrier will operate 11 flights from Warsaw's second biggest airport, including to destinations in Italy, Bulgaria, Moldova, Cyprus, and Malta. 2 aircraft will be based at the airport, allowing the airline to carry around 500,000 passengers per year and support the creation of 700 jobs. With Wizz Air's return to Modlin, Ireland-based rival Ryanair's monopoly over the airport comes to an end. In 3 weeks, the pair will be joined by Air Arabia, which plans to connect Modlin with Sharjah International Airport in the UAE. And that concludes this edition of World News. Thanks for joining us, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.